quiet corner of the bustling city park, a young woman sat on a bench, her eyes fixed on the distant horizon. The sun had just begun to set, casting long shadows across the well-trimmed lawns. Her name was Lena. She was 24, with long, auburn hair that fell in soft waves around her face. Her skin was pale from the long hours spent inside, working at the bookstore, and she had a gentle, unassuming manner about her. Today, she had decided to take a break from her usual routine, to sit in the cool evening air and read a book she had picked up on a whim. The park was a place she often sought refuge, a small patch of greenery amidst the concrete jungle. It was her sanctuary, where she could lose herself in the pages of a good novel and forget about the worries that plagued her. But tonight, she couldn't focus. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the conversation she'd had with her doctor that afternoon. The words echoed in her mind like a bad dream she couldn't shake. "You're pregnant, Lena." Her hands trembled as she held the book open, the words on the page swimming before her eyes. The news had come as a shock. She had been so careful, so vigilant. How could this happen? Her mind raced with questions, each one more overwhelming than the last. What would her parents say? Her boyfriend, Jack, was already dealing with his own issues, and she knew he wasn't ready for this. The weight of her secret grew heavier by the minute, a burden that seemed to press down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. The park grew quieter as the light faded. The laughter of children playing tag grew distant, and the chatter of the nearby couples grew softer. Lena felt a tear slip down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away. She knew she couldn't keep this to herself much longer. The decision she had to make would affect her entire life, and she had no idea what path to choose. As she sat there, the world around her grew still, and she realized she was not alone in her silent struggle. A young man approached the bench, his eyes filled with a curiosity that suggested he had noticed her distress. He took a seat next to her, his presence both comforting and unsettling. Without a word, he handed her a small, crumpled piece of paper. On it, scrawled in messy handwriting, were the words, "You're not the only one." Lena looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise. He offered her a tentative smile, his own troubles etched in the lines of his face. In that moment, she felt a strange kinship with this stranger, as if he knew exactly what she was going through. But how could he? She had told no one. Her thoughts swirled like a tornado, leaving her feeling lost and more confused than ever. The man, noticing her bewilderment, began to speak. His name was Alex, and he had his own secret to share. His girlfriend was expecting too, and like Lena, they were both unprepared and scared. He spoke of his fears and his love for the baby, but also of his inability to provide and his doubt about his ability to be a good father. His words struck a chord deep within her, resonating with her own fears and uncertainties. For the first time since receiving the news, Lena felt less alone in her predicament. The two of them sat together, sharing their stories and their fears. The night grew cooler, and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. As they talked, a sense of peace began to wash over Lena. Alex's honesty and vulnerability had given her the courage to voice her own fears, and she found that just talking about it made the burden feel a little lighter. They discussed their futures, the choices they had to make, and the lives that grew within them. It was a conversation she never would have imagined having, but it was exactly what she needed. As the last light of day disappeared, they parted ways, promising to keep in touch and support each other through their respective journeys. Lena felt a newfound strength as she walked back to her apartment. The decision was still heavy, but she knew now that she didn't have to face it alone. The story of her life was unfolding, and though she couldn't see the end, she had taken the first step in writing the next chapter. And maybe, just maybe, it would be a story of hope and growth, rather than despair.